That was Plus One with Soul Tattoo. You're on 94.9. It is 14 minutes past 4. And it's time to talk to Dr. John. First time this year. Dr. John, of course, is from Creation Ministries International. They do have a website. It's called creation.com. And on creation.com, there's thousands of pages of information. You can ask all sorts of questions and get answers. But we'd love you, if you have any questions, to ask the questions to be answered on air. So just send us a text message with your question to 0401 949 949. Now, I've noticed somebody just sent us they've recorded a message. We can't take recorded messages. They have to be quite literally text messages. So, if you can SMS 0401 949 949. Now, good afternoon, Dr. John.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Mick. Great to be back.
It's great to have you back. Happy New Year and everything.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
How was your Christmas break?
Christmas was very good. Very good. Yours?
Oh, fantastic. I went up north. What about you?
No, I went to Ballarat.
South?
Yeah, south. Yeah. A long way south, actually. And, interesting that I went to Ballarat because I've got, did have connections there. My wife grew up in Ballarat.
Oh, wow.
And I did my hospital residency at Ballarat Base Hospital.
Let me guess, did you meet each other around that time?
That would be correct, yeah.
Okay, there we go.
But look, neither of us have any connection with Ballarat anymore. Don't know anybody there.
Yeah.
But one of our sons has got a timeshare there with a particular group. So the whole family went to Ballarat for Christmas.
Oh, sounds exciting.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, Ballarat's a fantastic old country town.
Did you go gold prospecting?
No, but there's a bit in that story too. But yeah, no, it's a wonderful old town. It's the third largest city in Victoria after Melbourne and Geelong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful old buildings, big wide streets, glorious gardens, Lake Wendouree. Everything about Ballarat is terrific. It's one of these real old country cities in Australia that there's not much of antiquity in Australia, but places like Ballarat are there. And of course it's very, very famous because it was the site of the Eureka Stockade, which is the only real civil uprising in Australia's history.
Yes.
Where the miners took on the government of the day because as governments do, they'd levied digging licences and all that sort of thing on the miners who said that's not fair.
Yep.
And anyway, they had a pitched battle with the police, and I think nearly 30 people died in the battle. So it's quite historic. But and of course the leader of the miners, a bloke called Peter Lawler. He was wounded in the skirmish, but he eventually they won the day really in terms of getting the government to back off, and he then entered politics and Victorian Parliament.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so they didn't get hanged or anything for the uprising.
Mm.
But and a lot of gold came out of not just Ballarat, but all the Victorian goldfields. And I looked up the story about the Welcome Stranger nugget. The largest gold nugget ever found. The original nugget was over 100 kilos.
Wow.
I mean, that is a sizable chunk of...
That's my weight.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in today's money, that's worth about 10 million.
Wow.
Imagine tripping over a rock that's worth 10 million.
Yeah, I'm on my way down.
Yeah. But it's very, very good. And, of course, gold gets quite a mention in the Bible.
Mm.
Gets a mention in the first book of Genesis, talking about how I think even the second chapter, that the gold in a particular area is good. And of course, where gold comes from is quite interesting because it's particulate matter, and it comes out of hydrothermal water, really, and it gets deposited in the little streams of gold that you get.
Yep.
And it's interesting that only recently the secular scientific idea of where it came from has changed. They've had to change the ideas. They thought originally, it takes millions and billions of years for the gold to be deposited and so on. But they've had a look at some of the heavy deposits in places like British Columbia in Canada, and they now realise that it couldn't possibly have formed that way if you've got these big deposits.
Yep.
And really it has to have involved, think about this, seawater, hydrothermal activity, and rapid burial and deposition. Now, can you think of something in the Bible that might have...
Yeah, there's a story I read.
A story about a great big flood.
And a guy called Noah.
all the tectonic upheaval that happened that time. So, I mean, it is another classic example of how the secular world has had to change its ideas of how things came about, because it's obvious that they couldn't happen that way. And then when they work out how it probably did happen, it's all consistent with what the Bible has always said. Yeah. And I mean, how many times have we said this on this program, that nothing is ever discovered that contradicts the Bible? I mean, nothing proves the Bible to be true, but the biblical stories are always consistent with the accurate scientific discoveries, and I mean it's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was thinking, obviously, when you're in a place like Ballarat, you think a lot about gold, and of course there's that famous story about Archimedes, and in fact where the Eureka stockade gets its name from. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners would know the story, but Archimedes was a very famous Greek mathematician and scientist in the 3rd century BC. And he's best known for discovering what we call Archimedes' principle, which has got a great application, particularly in diving, and of course that was one of my big interests. But the way it came about, Archimedes, the emperor of the day, had given a whole lot of gold to a goldsmith to make him a crown. And he was a bit suspicious that maybe the goldsmith had diddled him and mixed some silver in with the gold and kept a bit of the gold for himself. So he wanted Archimedes to work out how to discover whether that was actually what had happened.
Yep.
And of course Archimedes, so the story goes, puzzled over that, and he discovered the solution when he was sitting in his bath. And he yelled out, "Eureka," which in Greek means, "I found it." So he discovered the answer. And the answer, of course, is that...
sitting in his bath got it for him.
He was sitting in the bath. And, of course, the answer is, because gold is a very, very heavy metal, a particular weight of gold, if it's put in water, it's going to displace a certain amount of that water.
Yep.
But if you take a lighter metal, even though it's heavy, like silver, and you put the same weight of silver in the water, it will displace more water because it occupies a bigger volume.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So that's what Archimedes discovered in his bath. The answer came to him, and of course, when he investigated it, sure enough, the goldsmith had diddled the emperor, and he had swiped a bit of the gold, and he had adulterated the gold crown with a bit of silver.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all of that came out of going to Ballarat and thinking about where gold came from and Archimedes and so on. Yeah. So it was an interesting Christmas.
Yes, and of course Solomon's mines, did it have gold?
Oh yeah. Well, there was a huge amount of gold in the temple that Solomon built.
Yep.
And in fact, when they got the people to contribute all their gold and stuff to make all the furnishings for the temple, the amount that was contributed was so overwhelming that it was more than they needed, really. But of course, all of the things that were built in that original temple disappeared because one of the kings, and I think it might have been, I can't remember whether it was Josiah or Hezekiah, he showed all of the beautiful furnishings and the gold goblets and things of the temple to one of the Assyrian visitors. And once that word got out, when Nebuchadnezzar plundered Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple, they pocketed all the gold and all the stuff that had come out of the temple. So that was the end of that. Including the Ark of the Covenant, which had been overlaid with gold. So that disappeared as well. So, pretty sad, a lot of sad things, but people have done a lot of bad things for gold over the centuries.
And they've got pretty heated up, even like at Eureka Stockade.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, I mean, the miners were just trying to eke a living out of the diggings. And as governments do, they wanted to, get a bit of that for themselves. Yeah,
and I'm sure someone was making a lot of money out of it, though, when the gold came out of the ground.
Yeah, well, they had a gold exchange in Ballarat. That's when the miners got their gold, they had to take it to the exchange to get the money for it and so on. So, very, very historic place.
Yes, exciting. We are with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. Hey, if you have any questions for Dr. John on creation or evolution or dinosaurs or aliens, send them through to us. Send your question via SMS, text 0401 949 949. That was Jesus Culture, Alive in You. You're on 94.9. It is 23 minutes to 5. And we have Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. And Dr. John's been telling us a bit about his holiday down to Ballarat and the whole gold mining area. Very interesting news there, Dr. John. But look, it is the first time that we get to talk to you guys from Creation Ministries this year. And for those people who might have only tuned in a few times, fairly new to the area, or maybe there's somebody who's never tuned in before when Creation Ministries have been on, I think it's a good time for you to give us a bit of a rundown on who Creation Ministries are and exactly what your purpose is.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, Mick. I mean, everybody, when we talk Creation Ministries, you think of, these people who are anti-evolution and whatever. But what we really are is an evangelistic ministry. I mean, we are a ministry that's looking to share the gospel. And the gospel, of course, is what God has done for us in Christ, and that's enabled us to be reconciled with Him because we are born out of relationship with God. And as a result of that reconnection with Him and reconciliation, we have our sins forgiven and we have a promise of eternity with Him. Now, a lot of other Christian groups, of course, are similarly evangelistic, and they're looking to share the same sort of thing. And we try to be a resource for them because we point out some of the arguments against what the world is pushing all the time. And those resources are really badly needed today because we live in a post-Christian society, and really the world doesn't have much time for biblical moral standards, doesn't have any understanding of what sin really is and why we are estranged from God. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the old methods that people used to use to share the gospel with their neighbours, they're not relevant anymore because people don't really know what you're talking about. You know, so what the problem is that everybody has been heavily indoctrinated with the secular scientific so-called story of where we came from. Mm-hmm. You know, they believe what they're told, that everything started off with a Big Bang. Now, you know, that Big Bang theory, there's not a scrap of evidence for it, but it's just an explanation of origins that doesn't include a creator God. That's all it is. And when you boil it all down, what the Big Bang postulates is that all the matter in the universe at a point in, well, there wasn't any time before this point. This is what began time. All of that matter was concentrated in a very, very, very tiny mass, which then exploded greater than the speed of light, and that formed all the matter in the universe. Now, I mean, that is pretty far-fetched, but every star, every planet came from that initial tiny speck.
Now, I was reading a little bit over Christmas about, you know, the big stories of 2023, as you get at the end of the year, of course. Yeah. And one of them was this new satellite that they've put up with a camera on it that is just amazing, and they've taken photos that have confounded all of the scientists and astrologers. They've sort of gone, it doesn't fit the Big Bang theory. But you know what? They haven't come up with another theory yet.
Yeah, well, it's well known that the Big Bang theory can only work if about 96% of the entire universe is made up of what they call dark energy and dark matter. That is stuff that we don't really know exists and nobody's ever seen it. Yeah. But the theory doesn't work unless you have it. Yeah. So really there's a lot of very, very strange things about the Big Bang theory. But that's what's mentioned all the time in the media. You know, that's where we came from, supposedly, according to science. Yep. And Mark Harwood, who's been on the program, he's got a saying, you know, it's nothing more than atheism dressed up in a white lab coat. You know, you see the expert on TV, the Professor so-and-so, who's wearing his white lab coat, and he says very seriously what, you know, the truth is. Well, of course, the truth really isn't that. And all of it is supposed to have happened about 15 billion years ago. And our solar system supposedly formed about 4.5 billion years ago. And all life then spontaneously, supposedly, arose. Simple to start with, and then getting progressively more complex with the passage of those billions of years. Now, the Bible doesn't say anything like that. The Bible talks about a very, very recent, and we're talking about a matter of only about 6,000 years ago, a recent creation by a creator God. And all the evidence that we find and that we look at is really consistent with the biblical story. Yeah. And of course, that's what we're on about at Creation Ministries. We want to be a resource. So we want people to be able to come to our website, creation.com, and any questions that they have about the science and evolution or creation, they will find the answers on that website.
Yep. It's amazing, you know. I look at the website sometimes and get some great little tidbits out of it. But you know, when you look at so many of the things that you guys talk about, and you understand how the Bible has sort of, they're not really prophecy. It just talks about how things came into play. It talks about how, Adam lived for, 1,000 years, and then his sons, they lived for a long time. And its entire story shows that we're living in a broken world where things are constantly breaking down. We've seen that as well. Scientifically, they've proven that things break down. Even looking at this COVID virus, it's getting weaker and breaking down more and more. Everything we see, everything we study seems to go the way that the Bible said it went. Yet all these scientists come up with a totally different idea.
Well, that's correct. And the other thing to remember, of course, is that everything that we read in our Bibles was written down beginning about 3,500 years ago, and it's never changed, right? And it has never been found to be incorrect in any area.
Interesting you say that. I had a chat at Christmas with a few friends, and I've seen another story just come up in regards to, I think it was a UK-based Methodist church. They've, issued guidance discouraging use of the terms husband and wife, and we see those sort of stories in some of the news out there, and then you get, people like some of the guys that I saw at Christmas time sort of saying, oh yeah, and they've seen these sort of stories, and they go, oh, but the Bible's been rewritten so many times. That story's just changed so much. Has it really?
No. The Bible has never been rewritten because it was written in the original languages. Old Testament in Hebrew, a little bit of Aramaic, and the New Testament in Greek. What has changed, of course, is the various translations. And it's a bit like for those of us who did languages at school. If you were given a passage in Greek or Latin or French or German or whatever, if there was an exam question, translate this passage into English, well, everybody would have a slightly different translation. Exactly the same passage, but a slightly different translation. And that's why we have so many, if you like to call them different Bibles, because they have been translated by different people who read a passage in the original language and they think it means this. Some Bibles are what we call translations. The particular one would be the King James Bible that was produced in 1611. Others are what we call paraphrases, that a translator has looked at what it says and tried to put it in a modern English phraseology so that people can understand it a little bit better.
Like the Message. I like to read it because it's just plain simple.
That's right. That's right. But there is no truth to the statement that the Bible has been changed and altered multiple times. It absolutely hasn't. And there are multiple thousands of old manuscripts that have been copied from the original, dating back to 100 years old, to 100 years after Jesus, 200 and so on. And you'd have to alter all of them to be able to demonstrate that it had been changed, because they all agree with one another. So, no, there's absolutely no truth to that story that the Bible has been written multiple times. It hasn't.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Dr. John, we're pretty much at the end of another awesome week.
Well, there's one other thing that I wanted to mention today, because when you started off today, you talked about some things that we talk about at Creation Ministries, things like aliens. Yep. And I thought I wanted to finish up tonight with just a little bit of a word about aliens. Yes. Because the reason why the scientific world believes, and so many people believe in aliens, is because they believe in evolution. And they think that if evolution had happened here, then perhaps it's happened elsewhere. Yep. And if you think about it, you would have seen the movie Avatar. Yes. You remember Avatar? Well, of course, that obviously things had evolved elsewhere, but they were humanoid people with tails, and six-legged things that they rode like horses, but, the same sort of thing that we have on Earth. Now, why on earth? Why would we have the same sort of thing as we've got on Earth? And one of the things that we can say categorically is, if the Bible is true, and we believe it is, and there is only 6,000 years of universal history, then there's no time for any evolution. And of course, if there were aliens on some other planet, they would either have been perfect and they hadn't fallen into sin, or they had fallen into sin and Jesus would have had to have gone there to do something for them, because he had to become a man here. So it doesn't make any sense. And really we have to say that if you really believe in the Bible, you've got to say the likelihood of aliens is practically non-existent.
Yes.
Well, in fact, I don't believe they are existent. And what people have seen, I think, are a lot of demonic manifestations.
And of course, Creation Ministries brought out a movie a few years ago that was spot on when it came to all of those demonic manifestations.
That's right. It's called Alien Intrusion, and we have a book and a film by that name. So, anybody who's interested, look that up on creation.com and see if you can get yourself a copy.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. John. An awesome week. And, of course, you're back next week. So if anybody does have any questions, please send them through 0401 949 949. That's our text line. Just SMS that number, 0401 949 949. I'll see you again next week, Dr. John. Thank you.
Yeah, you will, Mick. And we've already had one question come in for next week. So we're going to address that about the genetic diversity amongst Australian Aboriginals. So, that'll be good. But any other questions along those lines or any other line, then SMS it to 0401 949 949.
That's it. Thank you, Dr. John. You're on 94.9 this afternoon. It is 9 minutes to 5.